Bear with. Bear with.
As always, since you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. But before we get started, don't forget that if you like what we do around here, please give us a chance and subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, give us a like over at your favorite podcast services. We're basically available everywhere: Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. It's all good, and we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. You can find us on @In the Seats. We're at It's Podcast One on places like Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram for all sorts of updates. And finally, and this is most important, check us out over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of basically the moving image at large, film, television, you have it, because we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it. We love it when you come and read about it. It must be a Monday, and we've had a couple of setbacks and delays in this series, but it is a Monday here at In the Seats, which means it's time for a little celluloid management oversight. And on this episode, we are sitting down with the one and only Mr. Robert Bellissimo of Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. You can check him out on YouTube and with his own podcast. He is an actor, he teaches acting, and he is very much sort of a classic cinema guy. And that makes sense because the movie we're diving into today is from the one and only Charlie Chaplin, and it is City Lights, which you can find on the Criterion Channel. And we really broke it down and discussed sort of why this is maybe the one that gets overlooked in some certain cases, but also how iconic and how important it is in the Chaplin canon as well. It was a hell of a watch, and I mean, admittedly, it's one of those movies that you really have to sort of let sit with you to appreciate, because it definitely shows a lot of what is to come in the history of cinema as well. And it's a fantastic piece of work, which, like I said, if you have the Criterion Channel, I do recommend you go and stream Charlie Chaplin's City Lights right now. But first, enjoy our sit down with Rob as we dive into Mr. Chaplin's City Lights, because it's a good one.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, and as I always say, if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. But we're doing it a little differently today, as we've been doing a little lately. We've been undertaking a little celluloid management oversight, or celluloid oversight management. I always get them mixed up, but it's just in terms of, we talk with a wide variety of industry professionals, obviously current projects, blah blah blah, but really, when you get down to it in this business, we all came down as fans first, and we all watch and we all love movies, but we can't watch them all. And there's always stuff that we miss. I mean, and that's true across the board. And I mean, it's just one of those inevitable things in life, because quite honestly, there aren't enough hours in the day. But we're trying to rectify some of that with this. And on this one, we're actually diving into a little bit of a classic with the friend of the site, contributor, friend of the show, Mr. Robert Bellissimo. How you doing today, sir?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I mean, I love that you picked this one, because, I mean, admittedly, I don't know why for me, but this always feels like the Charles Chaplin movie that kind of gets overlooked for some reason. But really, it's such an interesting one, and it is all the way back to 1931 we're going, and we're looking at Charlie Chaplin's City Lights, which is yet another chronicle in the saga of his infamous character, the Little Tramp. And it's basically, it's a love story, because the tramp, as we know, is a vagrant, and he falls in love with a young blind woman who sells flowers on the streets, and he's kind of mistaken for a millionaire, and now he's running around town trying to raise money. It's a typical Tramp setup, but in many ways, this feels like maybe the biggest Tramp movie. Like, it feels almost the most cinematic. And I mean, just to kick things off, I've got to ask Rob, why was this the one you wanted to talk about? Because I mean, again, you like, on your channel, you cover classic film, you're a teacher, you've done so much stuff, but this feels like one you would watch first, not necessarily caught up to at a later stage. Why was City Lights the movie that fell through the cracks for you?
It's hard to pin down. I was thinking about this, and I guess I always could not quite grasp silent film. You know how some people just can't get into black and white movies because they're just so used to color, which I hate. And I think I was always a little hard to take to silent films. I'm not quite sure why. I haven't seen too many, but Chaplin, of course, I had seen the film when Robert Downey Jr. played him, which I enjoyed. I knew a little bit about him, but I never was too interested in the whole, pantomime silent film. I'm an actor. I come from the theater. I grew up on 70s filmmaking and that post method style of acting. So it just wasn't something I got to before. And it was something I started to get interested in. And I'm a big fan of the film scholar, Ray Carney, who wrote a lot of books on Cassavetes. And he has a lot of Chaplin's films on his recommendations list. So I've had them in my watch list for years. And I just, for some reason, never got to it. And then when this came up, I thought, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch City Lights. I think I had only seen The Kid before, which I really enjoyed, but I haven't really seen many of his films. So this was a first for me, and I'm glad I finally got to it.
Well, and I mean, I'm glad you were here with us as well. And I mean, for those of you who haven't gotten to it, you can stream City Lights. It is available on the Criterion Channel as we speak. It is probably one of the better, if not the best, streaming service out there for sort of high-level classic film and sort of interesting, weird stuff at the same time. Go check it out. We cannot recommend it enough. But when watching the film, because, I mean, I had seen Modern Times and I had seen a couple of others, but in watching this, it struck me because, I mean, obviously, when he made it, it's still a silent film, but he is using side effects, certain sound effects, and he is kind of pushing back against the convention of the talkie, which was kind of in its infancy when he made this. But no, he preferred to go silent, and he preferred to sort of use this method of performing, which I found kind of fascinating, especially in this big way. And I mean, particularly sort of in the relationship that he's trying to build with the young blind woman in Virginia Cherelle, and it really gives it this sort of earnestness as we see him go through it all. Because again, without the use of words, you've got to use body language, you've got to use your face, you've got to emote. I mean, as someone who, like you say, you grew up on the hardcore 70s stuff where there's real character driven dramas, how do you find these performances to sort of stack up to sort of other ones that maybe we're a little more used to? Because I mean, I'm genuinely fascinated just on his sort of ability as a performer to sort of really so many emotions without having to say anything.
It's certainly, it's top notch. I mean, he had the ability he knew when to be totally real, totally genuine. I mean, of course, that last, scene when the blind woman is cured, he paid for her to be cured of her blindness. And now she knows that he's the man who's been helping her all along. And I mean, my God, I mean, just the look on his face of, he looks somewhat embarrassed, somewhat shy, yet so excited to see her, and with the flower in his mouth. I mean, because the Tramp is like a kid in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But or even when he first sees her in the window and he realizes it's her, I mean, those expressions are not over the top. I mean, they are purely authentic. And from the woman as well, who's the blind woman, they were just really working off each other, and it's stunning. But then he also knew when to use the more over the top, pantomime scenes, particularly in the gags. I mean, the boxing scene. I mean, God, that's brilliant. I mean, how long that must have took forever to choreograph and block, and it's like a dance. I mean, just the way he moved. It's the spaghetti eating scene with the dinner with the millionaire. That must have just. I know he was a perfectionist and he did tons and tons of takes, but he knew when to kind of go big, and then he knew when to kind of pull back. And I imagine he did that because if the whole thing is just funny, then that's all it's going to be. But he wanted people, I imagine, to emotionally invest in the characters. So it's just that it's just a different style, and I think it's important to embrace all kinds of different styles through the different periods of film and how it evolved. And I think, that's another reason why I was slow to get to this, because I was only always interested in really realistic, truthful acting. But I'm just more fascinated as the beginning of cinema, as you said, if it's silent, they are going to have to be, it's going to have to be in the face and in the body. And, when you don't have dialogue, which doesn't mean you have to go big. I mean, sometimes you do, because they had to make certain points and gestures and stuff. But I thought it was, man, I mean, wow. I don't know how he moves the way he does. I mean, he's just, he was something else. I mean, it's no wonder people still are talking about him. And even the filmmaking is quite simple if you think about it. I mean, it's not like he's doing a lot of editing. It's often the people in the two shots, and then he really moved in closer for more of an emotional effect, and he just let it play out. He just follows the action. I love the moment with the blind girl when he gives her all the money, and then he keeps a note for himself. And then because she kind of touched his hand, he's so moved, and then he gives it back to her. I mean, it's so real. I mean, he just, wow, just it's stunning. I mean, I think every actors, filmmakers, everyone should see how this guy worked. I mean, it's brilliant.
No, I mean, it's such an interesting dichotomy too, because I mean, obviously the Tramp was this completely lovable character that audiences were wrapped up in, but I mean, in reality, he was a bit of a tyrant when it came to making films.
I know, which is a shame. I mean, it's the irony, because as I'm sure you know, like the woman who played the blind girl in this, like she wanted to leave early to get her hair done, and he fired her. And then he tried to replace her, but then he realized he had shot too much with her. I know in his last film, Brando talks about a countess from Hong Kong. Brando said he was terrible to his son. He tore up his son in front of everybody. Brando was late and he screamed at him. So Brando told him to take the film and stick it up his ass. So I know, and he was such a perfectionist. Some would like take after take after take. But I can understand why, because the blocking, the choreography, you'd have to get that down perfectly in those gags. There's just no other way.
Well, I mean, I think that is brought up perfectly, like you said, in that boxing scene, just the amount of rehearsal and the amount of sort of physical dedication to not just the performance, but the comedy as well. Because, I mean, it's a one shot. It's, for the most part, it's, and they're swinging and they're dancing and there's no, close cut-ins or cutouts. They're doing
there's no stunt people. Yeah, you're right. There's no stunts. Even in the earlier scene when he first meets the millionaire and he's jumping, they're falling into the water. I mean, apparently that was another thing. Apparently the original actor didn't want to do it, so he fired him, got someone else. But just I was like, that's him, and the other person with him. That's them jumping into the water and with a noose around their neck. I mean, wow. It's just the risks that these guys were willing to take for their art, for their work. It's wow. It's really stunning. I mean, it's really something to see.
No, I mean, I'm kind of curious from your perspective, because I'm always kind of fascinated, especially as I go around in this business and, meet various people and blah, blah, blah. I've always found it personally that, like, I need to watch as much as I can to know as much as I can to sort of validate what I do. But at the same time, it's impossible to see everything. And there's always going to be things that we sort of block out or push to the side or that kind of thing. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, why do you think we have those moments? Do you think it's just hours in the day, or is it just, do we sort of lean towards our preferences versus going towards maybe something that might be more educational? Because I mean, again, for guys of our age, we're not necessarily gravitating towards Chaplin. We're kind of fighting him later.
It's a good question. It's a really good question. And, with, like, as you mentioned, with, the Criterion Channel, there's so much, sometimes when I'm just scrolling through, I'm like, how do I not know some of these things? And I'm embarrassed at some of the directors I'm just getting to in the last few years. And I think in one way, you start with a certain interest, and then that evolves, and then some things you maybe have to push yourself. So yeah, why do we have to push ourselves to certain things? I think as perhaps as big of a cinephile or film buff as you may be, I think there's always going to be something that you're like, you're just it just doesn't speak to you. It's not pulling you in, and you may pleasantly surprise yourself by going to it and be like, wow, that was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Or or it just doesn't do it for you. I think it probably does come just down to, I mean, we're human, right? We like things, and then we like things, and we don't like other things. And I there's plenty of things that I still have not seen that I have no interest in. Like, Gone with the Wind, like I've never seen that. Ben-Hur, I've never seen. There's like Dr. Zhivago. Like there's certain things I'm just, like David Lean is someone I just never had any pull towards. But who knows? Maybe I would see it and be, totally blown away by his movies. So I don't know. It's a combination of taste, I suppose, and just, you want to see everything. You want to be as big as a film buff, but certain things just don't pull you in for all kinds of reasons maybe you're not even totally aware of.
No, for sure. I mean, I would agree with that. And I love that you even bring up Lean too, because I mean, I definitely feel like him and Chaplin almost have some similarities in terms of being filmmakers, because there's a certain degree of perfectionism and there's a certain degree of obsessiveness.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, I almost think we have a lot of that in ourselves, whether we sort of recognize it or not, as film fans, because we want to watch, we want to know, but at the same time, there is this sort of push and pull between preference versus, oh my God, I haven't seen that. Like you said, you can go on the Criterion Channel and go, holy shit, look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, how did I not watch this?
Yeah, exactly. There's just not, as you said, there's just not enough hours. And I mean, how many movies have been made? I mean, probably what, 1 million? Maybe, I mean, no one knows, right? Because now you could just make a movie on your phone and put it on YouTube. So, even if I calculate, a movie a day for maybe the last 25 years of my life, it wouldn't rack up to 1 million,
Exactly, it'd
be a couple of thousand, right? So really, all of us in a way have seen a drop in the ocean, probably from what's out there. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I wish I could really nail down, if we're such big film fans, then why don't we just check out every single thing? But I don't think it's that simple. I think some things just are like, I don't want to see that.
And it's kind of amazing too, because I mean, especially from a popular culture standpoint, it almost feels like the holy grails of television are kind of out there and they've been established and, they're readily available. Film, there's still so much to be mined from so many countries, from so many platforms, from so many ideas. It feels like one of those holy grails that guys like you and I will always be chasing but never achieve.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, there's just so much out there, and there's just not enough. There's not enough hours in the day to see everything. So you just have to kind of take your time, and hopefully you won't die anytime soon. So you can catch every Uzu and every Melville and every Claire Denis, someone just that was so recently. I was like, wow, how do I not know? I've seen a couple of her movies, but how do I not know her movies? It's really, I mean, I think it's also partly just film education. I mean, we've film schools, they focus on a lot of the same people.
Yeah.
And, now, of course, there's a real push fight for diversity in front of the camera and behind. So people are now looking at, more of Charles Burnett and people of color and females.
For sure,
Elaine May, I think, is one of the great filmmakers.
Oh my God,
and
yeah.
She's someone, and I've always loved her. And Heartbreak Kid and Mikey and Nikki are two of my favorite movies. And people, I know she made 4 features only, but people, hardly, I doubt you go to a film program and they're talking, hey, you know what we're going to study today? Elaine May. Like, it often is the same people, as much as I love Scorsese, De Palma, a lot of those Spielberg, those guys in the 70s. And when you go a little further back, it's, John Ford and Howard Hawks. And I know these guys are giants, but it's like, come on, let's broaden the education. So sometimes I'm not surprised I don't know some of these people, because they're just not, they're only now being talked about in the last, 5 years, 4 years?
No, for sure. And I mean, even when you look at something like Night of the Hunter, I mean, Lawton made one movie and then walked, and then that was it,
Yeah. Well, yeah, one classic, and then he was done.
Well, and that dovetails into something else I wanted to ask you, because I mean, the more we watch, the more we hear the word classic get thrown around. And I'm kind of curious, for someone who works in this industry, for someone who watches, and for someone who has a pretty wide breadth of knowledge when it comes to film, from your perspective, what makes a classic film?
I think if it is always, I think if it speaks to the human condition universally, and it does it so well, I think that is ultimately classic. Whether it's perhaps maybe, I think it can be simple in the fact that perhaps it's not a film that with repeat viewings you always see so much. I mean, as much as I like A Clockwork Orange, for example, and I think that is totally still relevant now with a lot of the questions the film asks, I don't necessarily consider it like a film that you'll keep seeing things after like 15 times.
Right.
But I would say that with something like Cassavetes' film Faces, I think you'll always see something, because it's so much about people, and he doesn't give you all the answers about their motives, and it's full of possibilities. And that really is endless. When you're talking about, he was interested in the middle class and the ordinary men and women. And so that's always universal. People's struggles are universal. You look at something like Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole, and the questions he was raising around media, and that media is not always something to trust, and how people are lack morals and are opportunists. So that is still the case. So for me, I think films that just speak to today, and then spoke to the times then, and it's the same reason why people still do Shakespeare, because he understood the human condition, the complexity of it. And it doesn't matter if you take Hamlet and set it in the 1500s, or you set it today, the people still have those exact same struggles. So
for sure.
I think it's a combination of it being relevant and also just being told so well, but then again, there are just things that like Casablanca, for example, which is considered one of the greatest films ever made. I mean, I think it's a really good movie. I don't think it's anywhere near a top 10 or even a top 20. But it's such a good story where, and of course, everything that you see in that film about the war is told more in a black and white way, which, as we know later, the World War II is much more in the shades of gray. So obviously it doesn't exactly hold up in that sense, but it's just a brilliant story. So maybe something about the way in which it's memorable from the dialogue to the performances to the cinematic way of telling the story. I mean, maybe that makes a classic. So it's again hard to nail down an answer, but for me, I think if it holds up then and it holds up now, and you keep seeing things every time, even if you've seen it 20 times, and you got a real work of art on your hands there.
Well, and it's a reminder of perspective too, because I mean, especially in the landscape we're in now, we tend to sort of get run over with sort of the opinion pieces and this, that, and the other, and trying to sort of go with that kind of flow. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you like it and it connects to you, then it's a good or a great or a classic film, depending on your definition. But when I circle it back to City Lights, and I mean, just having watched this, I think this was maybe my second or third viewing of it. In watching it, I don't know if I would call it classic Tramp, because I think we've seen other Tramp films that have maybe been a bit more sort of focused on the joke or focused on sort of the comedy of it. But I would almost view this as classic Chaplin, because we really get the sense of who Chaplin was as a filmmaker, and we get the character of the Tramp on a much bigger platform, and he feels much more like the everyman and much more relatable as he's running around town getting into his various adventures, as it were. And I'm kind of curious, like, to me, this reminds me of how good of an actual filmmaker Charlie Chaplin was. And I guess my question to you is, would you define City Lights as a classic?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I give it a 5 out of 5. I think, in terms of how it speaks to just the human condition, what's so interesting about the Tramp in this film is that no one can really see him, and they only see the surface of him as like this homeless pain in the ass kind of guy. Like right off the top, when he's like, they're those politicians are trying to do a speech about this, statue, and there he is sleeping on it. Everyone's just finds him a nuisance, and unfortunately, people still do that when you see a person on the street. Like, I mean, I've seen people be horrible towards someone who's homeless, and so we're not seeing the person; we're seeing the surface of the person, and so the millionaire only likes him when he's drunk. When he's not drunk, he's like, get this guy out of here. So no one can see this guy. And what I love about the ending is that the woman thinks he's rich. She's got that flower shop, and then first this like dashing man comes in, and she thinks, oh, maybe this is the man who helped me, and it's not. And then when she sees it's this guy who's the Tramp, and his baggy pants and torn up clothes, and I think that's why he was shy, and because he thought, oh, she's not going to like me because no one likes me, but then she sees him, and that's I think that makes it a classic, because I think we need to see each other more. I mean, we're human, but often we react to the surface of something, like, oh, this person's a bum, or this person's crazy, or this person's gorgeous, but who is this person really? Like, why don't I try to get to know them and see them, and what is their value? And everyone has value, and I think that ending really speaks to like, if we really listen and looked at each other and didn't just put labels on on who this person is in our own mind, we might meet some really fascinating people. Actually, I should say we will. So I think that's what makes it a classic. I think it's so touching, and it speaks to how we need to just really communicate more with one another. And I think it's a great lesson. But he does it in such a funny and emotional way, touching way. It's so to me that's why it's just a really perfect film.
Well, and I mean, it's hard to imagine, because I mean, in reality, the Tramp is almost the pop culture sort of stamp or signifier of the Depression, in a medium that at the time was meant to distract the audiences from the fact that there was a depression going on.
Right.
It really,
right.
You don't think of Charlie Chaplin films as social commentary, but in many ways they are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're right in the sense that sometimes I watched yesterday A Dog's Life, which is one of his short films, and it's less heart. It's more of the gags, and the gags are, it's very funny and brilliant. But you're right. I mean, by the time he got here, perhaps because of what was going on in the world, he wanted to really pull people in much more. I mean, I don't know his other features as well, but I know the kid is also was very touching, very much more about relationships. But yeah, that's true. And I know, of course, in the early 30s of some of those studios like Warner Brothers, they were intentionally making social consciousness films. And let's not just make escapism. Like we should reflect what's going on. So, I mean, thank God people sometimes do that, so we can look back. And I wish we could say the studios did that now.
No, I mean, it's true. It was such a fascinating time for movie making because, I mean, they were pumping them out as fast then as we are now. I mean, I think we've almost gotten to a point where we're pumping them out just as fast, but maybe not nearly as memorable in certain ways. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to cut through the noise. And I mean, I'm glad a film like this, after so many years, has still cut through the noise, because it's one of those things where I don't think the icon that was Charlie Chaplin is going to die, especially the Tramp. But I mean, I definitely think it's important to remember how much of a filmmaker he was beyond that as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's what makes it so iconic. I mean, sure, you might look at the image and say, oh yeah, that's Charlie Chaplin. But I think if you know a little bit, if you know more about the character, I mean, he's sort of everyone, because I think we all feel like the Tramp in some ways. We all feel like ignored, or people don't see the value in us, or they see the surface of us. But then people have also seen the value of us, and we all want to have a good time and laugh and have a good, and cry at the same time sometimes. And I think he sort of is the symbol of us in that way, our flaws and our better sides. And sure enough, the Tramp has his flaws. I mean, you see him kick a guy out of the way to get a cigar on the ground, like exactly. He's not above it. So, I mean, at the end of I'm so glad I saw it.
At the end of the day, I mean, that's what cinema is all about, to try to sort of put a reflection of humanity back out on the screen and tell stories like this. And I mean, it's a fantastic film. And I mean, and thank you just for engaging with me in a little celluloid management oversight on this, just to sort of cross another one off the collective list, and just to remind everyone that if you do want to stream City Lights or any other Charlie Chaplin movie, I think most of them pretty well are on the Criterion Channel.
Yeah.
So you should go check that out. But before we call it a day, Rob, I mean, I know you've got your own show, you got the podcast, you've got the YouTube channel, you are a teacher, you're an actor. Tell us what else you got going on, just for the good people out there, where they can find you.
Yes. So, well, you can find my YouTube channel. So youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. So I do a combination of deep dive reviews and interviews with various film professionals. And on Instagram, it's at Robert Bellissimo at the movies. Same with Facebook. There's a little print. It's RB at the movies. Find me there. And I do about 2 or 3 episodes a week on the YouTube channel. You can follow me there, and please subscribe, which always helps. Is always a big help.
Absolutely.
And
subscribe, everybody.
That's where you can find me. Yeah. We can't say it enough.
No, we'll say it until we're blue in the face, but like and subscribe, everybody. Like and subscribe. But I mean, Absolutely. Rob, thanks again for the time, man. This was a lot of fun, and keep doing the good work, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate that you had me on. So thank you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.